The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slowly opened with a deep, echoing sound that made the walls shake. Nari stood at the entrance, her small human form looking tiny compared to the enormous space before her. The chamber was bigger than any building she had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling stretched so high that she could barely make out the top, and strange lights floated in the air like captured stars. 12 different alien species sat in a perfect circle around the chamber. Each group had their own special section that matched what they needed to survive. The air smelled strange, like metal and something sweet that she could not identify. Her simple Earth uniform felt very plain compared to all the amazing technology around her. Nari took a deep breath and walked forward. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the quiet chamber. She carried only a basic translation device that Earth scientists had built in just 3 months after receiving the Council's message. The device was heavy in her pocket, and she hoped it would work properly when she needed it most. The Vorthak Empire delegates sat to her right. They looked like living crystals that changed colors when they moved. Their bodies were tall and sharp, reaching almost 3 meters high. Light seemed to dance inside their crystal skin, creating beautiful patterns that hurt to look at directly. When they spoke to each other, it sounded like wind chimes in a storm. One of the Vorthak delegates leaned toward another and made a sound like breaking glass. Even without her translator, Nari could tell they were talking about her. The way they moved their crystal heads and the flashing colors in their bodies made it clear they found something amusing about the humans standing in their great chamber. To her left, the Nexari floated in special containers filled with glowing gas. They had no solid bodies that she could see, just moving clouds of light and energy. Sometimes the lights would pulse all at the same time, and Nari realized they were sharing thoughts directly with each other. They did not need words like humans did. The idea made her feel very alone. The reptilian Cossack clan occupied the section directly across from her. They were huge creatures covered in dark scales that reflected the chamber's strange lights. Their eyes were yellow and cold, and when they looked at her, she felt like a small animal being watched by predators. One of them opened its mouth slightly, showing rows of sharp teeth, and made a hissing sound that might have been laughter. Other species filled the remaining sections. Some looked almost like plants, with green skin and leaves growing from their heads. Others were made of what appeared to be living metal, their bodies constantly shifting and changing shape. A few species she could not understand at all. They seemed to exist in different dimensions, appearing solid one moment and transparent the next. At the center of the circle sat Council Speaker Valdris Keth. His species, the Zenthans, looked the most like humans, but taller and thinner, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. He was considered one of the most diplomatic beings in the galaxy, but even he looked at Nari with something that seemed like pity. "Welcome, Representative of Sol 3, Speaker Keth said, in a voice that the translation device turned into perfect English. "We understand your species prefers to call your world Earth in your primary language." Nari nodded and tried to keep her voice steady. "Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. I am Han Nari, and I represent all of humanity." A sound rippled through the chamber that her translator could not convert. She realized it was laughter, but not the kind she knew. It was the sound of beings who found something cute or amusing, like adults watching a small child try to do something impossible. The crystal Vorthak delegate who had been talking earlier stepped forward. His voice came through her translator, as deep and commanding. "Tell us, little human, how old is your species?" "Humans have existed for about 300,000 years, Nari replied, remembering the briefing materials she had studied during the long journey to the council station. This time the laughter was louder and clearer. The Vorthak's crystal body flashed with bright colors. 300,000 years, he repeated, and somehow the translator captured his tone of disbelief. "My people achieved faster than light travel when your world was still covered in ice. We have been exploring the galaxy for over 2 million years. One of the Nexari's light clouds pulsed brighter, and a voice seemed to come from everywhere, at once. Our collective consciousness has existed for 5 million years. We have watched stars be born and die. Your entire species is barely a moment in galactic time. The plant-like species made rustling sounds that translated as agreement. The metal beings changed their shapes in patterns that seemed to express the same sentiment. Even the diplomatic Zenthans nodded their large heads in what looked like sympathy for her impossible situation. Nari felt her face grow warm, but she forced herself to stand straight. Earth had chosen her for this mission, and she would not let them down, even if she felt completely out of place among these ancient, powerful beings. "We may be young," she said carefully, "but we are eager to learn and contribute to the galactic community." The Kasek delegate, who had shown his teeth earlier, made a loud hissing sound. "Contribute?" The word came out harsh through the translator. What could a species that only recently discovered radio waves possibly contribute to civilizations that have mastered time and space? Speaker Keth raised one long, thin hand to quiet the chamber. The purpose of today's gathering is to evaluate humanity's request to join the Galactic Federation. Every species, regardless of age, deserves a fair evaluation according to our established protocols. He touched a control panel, and holographic displays appeared throughout the chamber. As you all know, membership in the Federation requires demonstration of 3 core competencies. First, technological innovation, the ability to create solutions that benefit galactic civilization. Second, strategic thinking, the capacity to solve complex problems and contribute to Federation defense. Third, species resilience, proof that your people can survive and thrive under extreme conditions. Nari listened carefully, knowing that Earth's entire future depended on how well she could prove humanity deserved to join these ancient, advanced civilizations. These tests have been administered to over 400 species throughout galactic history, Speaker Keth continued. They are designed to ensure that new Federation members can contribute meaningfully to our shared goals of peace, prosperity, and mutual defense. The chamber fell quiet as the implications sank in. Nari would have to prove that humanity, barely out of their own solar system, could stand equal to beings who had ruled the stars for millions of years. She looked around at the alien faces, crystal, energy, scale, metal, and stranger forms, all watching her with expressions that ranged from mild curiosity to barely concealed contempt. In that moment, standing alone in the center of the galaxy's most powerful governing body, Nari realized that she was about to take the most important test in human history. The young woman from Earth took a deep breath, checked that her translator was working properly, and prepared to begin humanity's greatest challenge. Speaker Keth touched another control on his panel, and the chamber's lights dimmed. New holographic displays appeared in the air around Nari, showing complex diagrams and data streams that she could barely understand. The testing was about to begin. "We will start with technological innovation," Speaker Keth announced. His voice echoed through the chamber with formal authority. "Representative Nari, please present your species' most advanced achievements for evaluation by the Council." Nari reached into her small bag and pulled out a simple data pad. It looked incredibly basic compared to the floating holograms and energy displays surrounding her. She plugged it into a universal connector that the Council had provided, hoping that Earth's technology could even communicate with their systems. The display flickered for a moment, then stabilized. Images of Earth's recent discoveries appeared in the air above her head. She began to speak, trying to keep her voice confident despite feeling so small among these ancient beings. "Humanity has recently achieved quantum computing," she said, pointing to diagrams of Earth's most advanced computers. "Our quantum processors can solve certain mathematical problems much faster than traditional computers. The Vorthak delegate's crystal body flashed with what seemed like amusement. Through the translator, his voice sounded bored. "We have been using quantum entanglement for basic calculations for over 50,000 years. What else do you have?" Nari felt her heart sink, but continued. "We have developed genetic therapy that can cure diseases and extend human life. We can now repair damaged DNA and prevent inherited illnesses." One of the plant-like aliens rustled its leaves in a pattern that her translator converted to dismissive laughter. "Genetic manipulation is elementary biology. Even the youngest species in the Federation mastered this technology within their first 10,000 years of civilization." The presentation continued with fusion reactors, space elevators, and artificial intelligence. Each achievement that Earth considered revolutionary was met with yawns, dismissive comments, or outright mockery. The Cossack delegate actually fell asleep during the explanation of human space travel, his huge reptilian form snoring loudly enough to shake the floor. "Your fusion technology is quite primitive," commented one of the metal beings, its form shifting into shapes that somehow expressed condescension. "We abandoned fusion power 300,000 years ago in favor of zero-point energy extraction." The Nexari collective pulsed with synchronized light patterns. Their shared voice filled the chamber like a chorus. "Your artificial intelligence systems are barely capable of basic pattern recognition. We achieved true machine consciousness before your species existed." Speaker Keth made notes on his holographic display as each technology was evaluated and found lacking. When Nari finished her presentation, the silence in the chamber was heavy with disappointment. She could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her like a physical force. "The technological innovation assessment is complete," Speaker Keth announced diplomatically. "While humanity shows promise, your achievements fall well below Federation standards for advanced membership." Nari nodded, trying not to let her discouragement show. She had expected this result, but it still hurt to see Earth's greatest scientific achievements dismissed so casually by beings who considered them ancient history. "We will now proceed to strategic thinking," Speaker Keth continued. The chamber's environment changed completely as new holographic systems activated around them. This test evaluates a species' ability to solve complex military and diplomatic problems under pressure. A three-dimensional star map appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a solar system with multiple planets, asteroid fields, and space stations. Fleets of ships moved through the display in different colors, representing various factions in conflict. "You will be given command of the Blue Fleet," Speaker Keth explained, pointing to a small group of ships near the edge of the system. "Your objective is to defend the civilian population on the central planets while facing attack from 3 enemy factions, red, yellow, and green. Each faction has superior numbers and more advanced technology than your forces." Nari studied the display carefully. Her Blue Fleet consisted of only 12 ships, while each enemy faction had at least 30 vessels. The enemy ships were also larger and appeared to be better armed. The civilian planet sat in the center of the system, completely exposed to attack from multiple directions. "This scenario has been used to test over 300 species," added the Vorthak delegate, his crystal form flashing with anticipation of watching another failure. "The average species manages to save approximately 20 to 30% of the civilian population through defensive tactics and strategic retreats. The highest score achieved was by the Nexari collective," spoke one of the energy beings, their lights pulsing with pride. "We managed to save 48% of the population through superior coordination and tactical analysis." The Cossack delegate had woken up and was now watching with interested yellow eyes. "Most species focus on building defensive positions around the civilian planets. A few try to delay the enemy attacks through hit-and-run tactics. All eventually fail when overwhelmed by superior numbers." Nari walked closer to the holographic display, studying the positions of all the fleets and planets. She could see why. This test was so difficult. The enemy factions were approaching from different directions, making it impossible to defend everything at once. Any attempt to build strong defenses in one area would leave other areas vulnerable. "How much time do I have to study the situation?" she asked. "The simulation begins in 5 standard minutes," Speaker Keth replied. "During that time, you may examine all available data about fleet capabilities, planetary defenses, and enemy movement patterns." Nari spent the next few minutes quietly analyzing the display. She asked for detailed information about each ship type, weapons ranges, communication systems, and supply lines. The council members watched with mild interest, expecting to see the same defensive strategies they had observed hundreds of times before. As the simulation timer counted down, several aliens made quiet comments to each other about expected outcomes. The Vorthak delegate was already preparing his dismissal speech. The Nexari Collective seemed to regard the test as a mere formality before rejecting humanity's application. "Simulation begins now," Speaker Keth announced. The star map came alive as the enemy fleets began their coordinated attack on the civilian planets. Red faction ships moved in from the north, yellow faction from the east, and green faction from the south. Their strategy was clear: surround the center and overwhelm any defenses through superior firepower. But instead of moving her ships toward the civilian planets to establish defensive positions, Nari did something that made the entire council sit up in surprise. She divided her small fleet into 3 groups and ordered them to attack the enemy formations directly. The Kasek delegate hissed in confusion. "What is she doing? Those are suicide attacks against superior forces." The chamber filled with murmurs of bewilderment as Nari's ships charged straight into enemy formations, appearing to abandon any hope of defending the civilians they were supposed to protect. To the ancient, experienced council members, it looked like the most foolish military strategy they had ever witnessed. But Nari had a plan that none of them could imagine. The holographic display showed Nari's blue ships racing toward the enemy formations at full speed. The council members watched in stunned silence as what appeared to be the most reckless military strategy in galactic history unfolded before their eyes. "She has divided her forces against superior numbers," the Vorthak delegate said, his crystal body flashing with disbelief. "This violates every principle of tactical warfare. Her ships will be destroyed in minutes." The Nexari Collective pulsed with confused light patterns. Their shared consciousness had analyzed thousands of military scenarios, but they had never seen anything like this approach. The human appears to have misunderstood the objective entirely. She is supposed to defend the civilians, not launch hopeless attacks. But as the simulation continued, strange things began to happen. Nari's first group of ships struck the Red faction fleet just as they were preparing to bombard the northern civilian planet. However, instead of engaging in direct combat, the human ships fired a few shots and then immediately retreated. The Red faction commander, programmed with standard military responses, ordered his ships to pursue the fleeing human vessels. This pulled the entire Red fleet away from their planned attack route and into an area where they would arrive much later than expected. "Interesting," Speaker Keth murmured, leaning forward to watch more closely. "She is using her ships as bait to delay the enemy advance." Meanwhile, Nari's second group attacked the Yellow faction from an unexpected angle. But these ships did something even stranger. They broadcast fake distress signals claiming to be Red faction vessels under attack by the Green faction. The Yellow faction commander, believing his ally was being attacked, immediately changed course to help the Red ships. The Kasek delegate's yellow eyes widened with surprise. She is creating false communications. The Yellow faction now believes the Green faction has betrayed their alliance. The third group of human ships executed the most complex part of Nari's plan. They approached the Green faction fleet while broadcasting Yellow faction identification codes. When the green ships tried to communicate with what they thought were their allies, the human ships responded with angry messages, accusing the green faction of attacking yellow ships without permission. Within 1 hour of simulation time, something unprecedented began to happen. The three enemy factions, who had been coordinating their attack perfectly, started to turn on each other. The red faction arrived late to find yellow ships in the area where they expected to meet green ships. The yellow commander demanded to know why green ships had attacked his allies. The green commander insisted he had done no such thing and accused the yellow faction of lying. "This cannot be happening," the plant-like alien whispered, its leaves rustling with amazement. "The enemy factions are fighting each other instead of attacking the civilians." The situation escalated quickly. Red faction accused green faction of trying to take all the glory by attacking first. Green faction blamed yellow faction for poor coordination. Yellow faction insisted that green faction had betrayed the alliance by attacking red ships without warning. Nari watched the display, calmly as the enemy fleets moved away from the civilian planets and toward each other. Her small human ships stayed at the edges of the battle, occasionally firing shots that could have come from any of the three factions, adding more confusion to the chaos. How did she know this would work? The metal being asked, its form shifting into patterns of bewilderment. The enemy artificial intelligence systems are programmed with advanced strategic thinking. They should not fall for such simple deception. But Nari had understood something that the Council had never considered. The enemy factions were programmed to be suspicious of betrayal because that was realistic military behavior. However, they were also programmed to trust their communication systems and identification codes. By manipulating both elements, she had turned their own programming against them. The simulation continued for another hour as the three enemy factions engaged in fierce combat with each other. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light as former allies became enemies. Supply lines were cut, communication networks were disrupted, command structures collapsed as different factions blamed each other for the disaster. Meanwhile, not a single civilian planet was attacked. The population that the human representative was supposed to protect remained completely safe while their would-be conquerors destroyed each other in pointless battles. "The simulation parameters are becoming unstable," Speaker Keth announced, his voice filled with disbelief. "The enemy factions have abandoned their primary objectives entirely." By the third hour, something even more remarkable happened. Nari's small fleet began capturing enemy ships whose crews had abandoned them during the confusion. Ships that had been damaged in the factional fighting were easy targets for the human vessels, which had remained mostly undamaged throughout the entire battle. The Vorthak delegate's crystal body flashed rapid patterns of color as he tried to process what he was seeing. She is not just surviving the scenario. She is winning it. The Cossack delegate stood up from his seat, his huge reptilian form towering over his section of the chamber. "This is impossible. No species has ever achieved a positive outcome in this simulation. It is designed to test damage control, not victory. But victory was exactly what was happening. By the end of the fourth hour, the three enemy factions had destroyed 60% of their own ships fighting each other. The remaining vessels were scattered, damaged, and completely disorganized. Nari's fleet had captured 15 enemy ships and controlled most of the strategic positions in the solar system. The civilian planets were not only undamaged, they were now better protected than they had been at the start of the simulation. "Simulation complete," the computer announced. "Blue faction victory. Civilian survival rate, 100%. Enemy fleet captured, 73%. Strategic objectives exceeded." The chamber fell completely silent. For several long minutes, none of the council members could speak. They stared at the holographic display showing the impossible results, their ancient minds struggling to understand what they had witnessed. Speaker Keth was the first to find his voice. In 400 species tested over 2 million years, he said slowly. No representative has ever achieved a positive victory condition in this scenario. The simulation was designed to be unwinnable. The Nexari Collective's lights pulsed in, synchronized confusion. Their shared consciousness, which had solved countless strategic problems over 5 million years of existence, could not fully comprehend what the young human had accomplished. How? The metal being asked, its form constantly shifting as if trying to find a shape that could contain its bewilderment. How did you know that strategy would work? Nari looked around the chamber at the alien faces staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to fear. For the first time since entering this place, she did not feel small or insignificant. She had proven that humanity might be young, but they were not helpless. On Earth, she said quietly, we call this strategy divide and conquer. It is one of the oldest military tactics in human history. The silence that followed her words was deeper than space itself. The silence in the chamber stretched on like a held breath. Council members who had lived for thousands of years found themselves unable to process what they had just witnessed. The impossible had happened, and it had been accomplished by the species they considered the most primitive in the galaxy. Speaker Keth finally managed to speak, his voice shaking slightly. We will now proceed to the final test, species resilience. He paused, looking at his notes as if they might somehow explain what had just occurred. This evaluation examines your people's ability to survive extreme challenges and overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The other council members shifted uncomfortably in their sections. The casual dismissal they had shown earlier was completely gone. The Vorthak delegate's crystal body had stopped flashing with amusement and now glowed with a steady, worried light. The Nexari Collective's usual synchronized pulsing had become erratic and confused. Nari activated her datapad once again, but this time her movements were more confident. The previous test had changed something fundamental in the room's atmosphere. She was no longer just a primitive representative begging for acceptance. She had proven herself capable of things that terrified beings who thought they knew everything about warfare. Most species present their ancient history for this test, Speaker Keth explained, his diplomatic tone now carrying a hint of nervousness. Asteroid impacts, ice ages, evolutionary challenges that occurred millions of years ago. These events demonstrate how your ancestors survived to become the civilization you are today. The plant-like aliens rustled their leaves in agreement. Our people survived the great solar flare that burned our original homeworld's atmosphere, one of them said through the translator. This happened 8 million years ago and nearly destroyed our entire species. The metal beings changed their forms into memorial shapes. We endured the quantum plague that threatened to dissolve our molecular structure. It took us 5 million years to develop immunity. Each species began sharing their ancient survival stories, disasters that had happened so long ago that they were more legend than history, events that had shaped their evolution but were safely buried in the distant past. When the sharing was complete, all attention turned to Nari. They expected to hear about Earth's ice ages, or perhaps the asteroid that had killed the dinosaurs millions of years before humans existed. Instead, she activated her presentation, and data began flowing across the chamber's displays. The challenge humanity overcame, Nari began, her voice steady and clear, was not something that happened to us millions of years ago. It was something we did to ourselves, and it continued until very recently. The holographic display showed a three-dimensional map of Earth, but it was not the peaceful blue and green planet they expected to see. Instead, it was covered with red markers, thousands of them, scattered across every continent and spanning thousands of years. Each red marker represents a major war fought by human beings, Nari explained. Not against alien invaders or natural disasters, but against other humans. The Cossack delegate leaned forward, his yellow eyes focusing intently on the display. As a warrior species himself, he understood the implications better than the others. You fought wars against your own kind for our entire recorded history, Nari confirmed. And many of these wars involved our entire planet. The display zoomed in to show specific conflicts. The scale of human warfare became clear as data streamed past the shocked council members. World War I, 20 million dead. World War II, 70 million dead. Countless smaller conflicts that had raged across the centuries. This is impossible, the Vorthak delegate said, his crystal form flickering with disbelief. A species cannot survive constant warfare against itself. The mathematics of survival do not support such losses, but the data kept coming. Nari showed them humanity's military expenditures throughout history. While other species had spent their resources on exploration and scientific advancement, humans had poured incredible amounts of energy into creating better weapons, developing superior tactics, and learning how to defeat enemies who were exactly as intelligent and determined as they were. Your people created weapons capable of destroying your entire civilization, one of the Nexari observed, their lights pulsing with horror. Why did you not use them? We did use them, Nari replied quietly. Twice. And then we realized what would happen if we used them again. The display showed the atomic bombings, the nuclear arms race, and the terrifying period when humans had built enough weapons to destroy their planet dozens of times over. The council members watched in growing alarm as they realized they were not looking at ancient history. This had all happened within the last century. Every human nation spent decades preparing for war with other human nations, Nari continued. We developed strategies to fight enemies who knew our weaknesses because they shared them. We created tactics to defeat opponents who were just as smart as we were, just as desperate as we were, and just as willing to do anything to survive. The implications began to sink in. The Cossack delegate was the first to understand what this meant. Every military strategy your species developed was tested against opponents of equal intelligence. Every weapon system was designed to work against enemies who understood it as well as we did. Nari agreed. Every tactical innovation was created to overcome defenses built by people who thought exactly like us. The chamber filled with uncomfortable silence as the council members realized what they had been evaluating. They had not been testing a primitive species that had recently discovered space travel. They had been measuring themselves against a civilization that had spent millennia in constant warfare against equally matched opponents. The scenario you just completed, Speaker Keth said slowly, was designed based on conflicts between different species with different capabilities and thinking patterns. But you approached it as if you were fighting against humans. Because that is what we know how to do, Nari replied. On Earth, every enemy was human. Every opponent thought like us, planned like us, and adapted like us. If you could not outthink another human, you died. The metal beings shifted into defensive postures without realizing it. Your entire species is composed of military strategists. Not just strategists, Nari corrected. Survivors. Every human alive today is descended from people who won wars against other humans. For thousands of generations, only the smartest, most adaptable, and most determined humans lived long enough to have children. The Nexari collective's lights began pulsing in rapid, panicked patterns. Their shared consciousness was finally processing the full truth. You are not a peaceful species that recently discovered space travel. You are a warrior species that has recently learned peace. The Vorthak delegate's crystal body flashed with colors that the translator could not convert, emotions that had no equivalent in other languages. How many of you are there? 8 billion, Nari answered simply. The number hung in the air like a threat. 8 billion humans, each one descended from warriors who had survived humanity's longest war, the war against themselves. 8 billion individuals who carried genetic and cultural programming for survival, adaptation, and victory against equally intelligent opponents. "What ended your wars?" Speaker Keth asked, and for the first time, there was fear in his diplomatic voice. Nari looked around the chamber at the alien faces, staring at her with new understanding. "We got tired of fighting each other," she said, "and we started looking at the stars." The fear in the chamber was thick enough to touch. Council members who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what they had just learned. The young human standing before them was not the primitive representative they had expected. She was something far more dangerous, a diplomat from a species of natural-born warriors. Speaker Keth was the first to recover his composure, though his voice still carried an edge of worry. "Representative Nari, your species has clearly demonstrated remarkable capabilities. However, the Council must ask a crucial question." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "What are humanity's intentions toward the galactic community?" The question hung in the air like a sword ready to fall. Every alien in the chamber leaned forward slightly, waiting for an answer that could determine the fate of civilizations. The Vorthak delegate's crystal body had dimmed to almost darkness, while the Nexari collective's lights pulsed in rapid, nervous patterns. Nari looked around the chamber, seeing the fear in their alien faces. She understood what they were thinking. If humans were this dangerous as a young species that had barely left their own solar system, what would they become when they had access to galactic technology and resources? "I can see that you are afraid," she said quietly. "And I understand why." The Kasek delegate hissed softly, his yellow eyes never leaving her face. 8 billion warriors with access to Federation technology could conquer the entire galaxy within a few centuries. "Your military strategies are beyond anything we have encountered," added one of the metal beings, its form shifting into defensive configurations. "If your people decided to expand through conquest, we would have little chance of stopping them." Thutch, plant-like aliens rustled their leaves in distressed patterns. "Our peaceful civilizations have never faced opponents who think like humans think. We would not know how to defend ourselves." Nari nodded slowly, acknowledging their fears. "You are right to be concerned. Humans are very good at war. We have spent thousands of years learning how to fight, how to win, and how to survive against impossible odds." Her words made the situation worse. Several council members shifted nervously in their seats. The Nexari collective's lights began blinking in what appeared to be panic signals. "But," Nari continued, raising her voice slightly to regain their attention, "you are asking the wrong question." Speaker Keth frowned, his large black eyes reflecting confusion. "What do you mean?" "You want to know what humanity's intentions are toward the galaxy," Nari explained. "But the important question is not what we plan to do. The important question is what we have already chosen not to do." She activated her datapad one final time, and new information appeared on the chamber's displays. This data was different from the war statistics she had shown before. These charts showed declining numbers, peace treaties, and military forces being reduced year after year. "Our last major war ended 80 years ago," Nari said. "Since then, human military spending has dropped by 60%. We have destroyed most of our nuclear weapons. We have turned our armies into peacekeeping forces and disaster relief organizations." The Vorthak delegate's crystal form began to glow again, though still dimly. "But why? If your species is so successful at warfare, why abandon it?" "Because we learned something that you have never had to learn," Nari replied. "We discovered the true cost of victory." She showed them images of Earth cities rebuilt after wars, hospitals filled with wounded soldiers, and memorials to the millions who had died in human conflicts. "Every war we won taught us that winning was not enough. Every victory came with a price that made us question whether fighting was worth it." The chamber remained quiet as the council members studied the data. They saw patterns they had never encountered before, a warrior species that had voluntarily given up warfare not because they were weak, but because they had become too good at it. We reached a point where we could destroy ourselves completely, Nari continued, and we realized that being able to win any war was meaningless if there was nothing left to win. Speaker Keth leaned back in his chair, his diplomatic mind working through the implications. So, humanity chose peace, not from weakness, but from strength. From understanding, Nari corrected. We learned that the ultimate victory is not defeating your enemies. It is making sure you never have to fight them at all. The Kasich delegate, whose species still settled many disputes through combat, found this concept difficult to grasp. But if you are capable of conquest, why choose cooperation instead? Nari smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Because we tried conquest for thousands of years, and it never made us happy. Every empire we built eventually fell. Every victory led to new conflicts. Every war we won just taught our enemies how to fight us better. She gestured to the displays around them. We spent all that time fighting each other, and what did we accomplish? We nearly destroyed our own planet. We wasted countless resources. We killed millions of our own people. But then we started working together instead of fighting each other, she continued. In the last 100 years working together, we have achieved more than we did in thousands of years of warfare. We cured diseases, explored space, and learned to live in peace. The metal beings shifted into more relaxed configurations. You chose cooperation because it was more effective than conflict. Exactly, Nari agreed. We are not asking to join the Federation because we want to conquer it. We are asking to join because we have learned that cooperation creates better results than conquest. The Nexari Collective's frantic light patterns began to slow and synchronize again. But how can we be certain that humanity will not return to warfare if circumstances change? Because we remember what warfare costs, Nari replied. Every human child learns about our wars in school. We teach them what happens when intelligence is used for destruction instead of creation. We make sure they understand that war should always be the last choice, not the first. Speaker Keth stood up from his chair, his tall form commanding attention from the entire chamber. The council must deliberate on this unprecedented situation. We have never encountered a species like humanity, one that has mastered warfare so completely that it has chosen to abandon it. The various alien species began murmuring among themselves in their different languages and communication methods. Crystals flashed, lights pulsed, leaves rustled, and metal forms shifted as they discussed what they had learned. After several minutes, Speaker Keth called for order. The Council has reached a decision regarding humanity's application for Federation membership. Nari felt her heart racing as she waited for their verdict. Earth's entire future hung in the balance of whatever these ancient beings decided. The vote is unanimous, Speaker Keth announced. Humanity is accepted into the Galactic Federation with full membership privileges. But his expression remained serious as he continued. However, our reasons for acceptance are very different from what we originally expected. We are not welcoming a primitive species that needs our guidance. We are accepting an ally whose military wisdom could protect us from threats we have never imagined. The Vorthak delegate's crystal body flashed with respectful light patterns. A species that has learned to master both war and peace may be exactly what the galaxy needs. As the session ended, Nari realized that she was returning to Earth not as a supplicant who had begged for acceptance, but as humanity's first galactic ambassador. The young woman from Earth had proven that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in fighting, but in choosing when not to fight. The council chamber began to empty, its members leaving with a new understanding of what true power meant. They had learned that in the vast cosmos, the most dangerous species might not be the ones with the best weapons, but the ones who had learned when not to use them.